Man, this makes me so angry. You know, that I don't hear much education. I just hear a bunch of, oh, you suck at this, you suck at this, you don't do this, you don't do that. How's the guy going to feel leaving this lesson? These videos are getting them a little bit harder to find, and I'm not sure it's because they're so old, GolfTEC system doesn't allow them to be uploaded, or GolfTEC themselves is asking YouTube to put these away. I'm not sure, but I'm just putting that out there. Welcome to the Lion Golf Academy, folks. Today we're going to be looking at some lessons that GolfTEC did for these students, and they uploaded up to the internet some many moons ago just for us to watch. Thank you very much. And this is the third video in this series, and it's probably going to be one of the last, seeing as I can't find these videos. But if you were a former GolfTEC student and you have some videos like this, send it to me. I'm very curious. We're going to look at 2 evaluations today, and then we're going to finish off with something that I do agree when I saw one of these GolfTEC videos. So there's plenty of good instructors at GolfTEC, but I'm just a little bit concerned of what they're trying to teach on this whole model of the Tour Pro. We're not Tour Pros, we're just average hacks trying to hit the ball a little bit better. But enough of that. If you do like this, hit that like, share, subscribe, and don't forget about Sunday. We do our live swing analysis on your swing for free, so send me your videos. But let's check this out. First one we're going to look at is a swing evaluation. Let's just take a little listen.
Yeah, so one of the things we're going to talk about is the grip. Part of that is that open face that you have it addressed. We definitely need to address that. We've got to get that squared up. And the only reason I say that is when we go to neutral, we go to neutral grip, we go to a more basic, fundamentally sound golf swing, that open face is going to hurt you more than help you. Okay. Right now you're relying on it, but we need to not rely on it. That's a Band-Aid fix to a problem. So we're going to fix it. Now, when I look at the setup overall, the one thing that I see for you have wide shoulders or broad shoulders, right? You have a very narrow stance for your body build. We need to widen your stance out a little bit. It'll allow you a better platform. It'll also allow you to restrict rotation back some in the backswing. So the wider your...
Okay, so a couple things real quick. With the stance, there are some negatives and positives. Maybe he needs a narrow stance because he lacks rotation. The wider you take your stance, the harder it is to rotate, but the more swaying comes involved. So it really depends. Now, he said something about the open club face as something that he has relied upon in his swing. But why? Why is it relied upon? What is his take on that? The student's not going to remember why, so this will be a good time for that instructor to say, hey, the reason your club face is open is because of blah, 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 whatever he saw, to make sure that the student is on board with the instructor's vision. Let's continue.
Your stance is, the less you can turn back. You turn back too far for the most part, and we'll talk about that as we go. Now, we're going to draw some lines on the screen just to give us a nice view of what's happening. Change that up to a blue line. There we go. And then I have a couple lines that go down from the hips down and hips down to help us see sway and other things in the swing. So as we go ahead and take his club back, we're going to start on Tiger's side. Overall, at address from this view, I don't really have anything to talk to you about. Your tilt is at 13 to the right. It's really not that bad. The average is 10 right. So it looks different because of the way the hands are and where you've already taken the club back some. And that's what we'll figure that out as we go.
Okay, so far I have not heard anything about that ball position and how he's manufacturing a forward press. And this is the biggest cardinal sin that amateurs try to do, is they push those hands way out in front, trying to steal this forward press because they've been told you've got to get a forward press because that's how you hit the ball at impact. You've got a forward press, but that's not correct. You get a forward press because you start more neutral, and when you start more neutral, you can get more weight distribution to your left side and more tilting, and that gets your hands out in front. It's not a premature forward press, because if you prematurely forward press, you have to now move around to accommodate that forward press to match up your 2 circles, and now you're going to have a unique impact position where you cannot get to the guy on the left side, which is a huge disservice. Why are you going to put number 1 in the world this time versus yourself and expect to emulate that? That is so unfair to the student. But let's get going.
But I don't think we have too many issues there, honestly. Widening the stance is the main thing. So we take him to halfway back. Take you to halfway back. So halfway back, by definition to us, is club parallel to the ground. So club parallel to the ground is the checkpoint. When we look at the checkpoint, we want to see a few things. One, we have a nice amount of shoulder turn at 43 degrees. Your shoulder tilts at 24 degrees, which isn't bad. You're pretty close. We want like a 2-to-1 ratio. So it's not perfect by all means, but it's not horrible either. So you're fairly tight to 2-to-1. We need you somewhere more in the upper 40s for that to be perfect. And then we'll talk a little bit more on the side view why that needs to happen. But for the most part, it looks good. We have good width here. You're rotating your shoulders back good. You're no sway yet. I'd like to see that right knee in a little bit more on the way back. Say he keeps his right knee in. He doesn't let it push out. We still have gap between that line and his knee. So that's a small thing you can do to help with lower body movement. Go ahead.
I have no idea what he's trying to point out. He's pointing out game of inches with Tiger's right knee when he's in a completely different position. He brought up a shoulder turn number. What is his hip turn? How is that related to his shoulder turn? How's he separating the shoulders? And the tilting, the 2 to 1, I get what they're trying to say, but it's really relative to your spine angle at the start of your swing. If you're turning perpendicular to your spine and you're standing up at address when you start to swing, your tilting's not going to be the same as if you have a very forward bend. You have to tilt a little bit more. So this whole thing about where you should be based on the best in the world, it's not fair to the students.
Take this on up a little further. Nice pivot and rotation. So the top of his swing. We like to see that he's angling his upper body away from the target. That's just a good sign that he pivoted. So we look at it from the hip here all the way up the spine. That shows that that arrow should be back away from the target. That's the ideal spot. We go on up on your side here. Now, when we get to the top of the swing, we see some differences, right? Now, here's a really cool, interesting fact. Did you know that you only turn to 76 degrees at the top? And that's actually a short turn?
Okay.
So you don't turn enough, technically. But it's how you're turning why it's not right. You're not getting much of a pivot. Do you see how your back is more straight up?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that does not look like 76 degrees. That looks like it has slightly more shoulder turn than Tiger on the left side. If you were to draw a line right here, that is definitely more than 90 degrees. I mean, 90 degrees is where that blue line is. It is definitely more turn. So that's the problem. If these things that they stick on these students are not in the right place, you can start to get these numbers that are off, and you have to rely with instructors that rely solely on numbers. All they look for is numbers, and they try and relate a position to these numbers. They're going to say 76 degrees. Well, bring up his hips. How much does have his hips turned? If you see an obscene amount of separation, then something might be wrong with your little harness that you got in there, because if you put that harness too high or too low or tilted or twisted, it's going to switch. It's going to move around when you swing. So I just don't buy that that's 76 degrees. But let's just keep listening to what he's saying.
Down, and his is tilted more away from the target. So you're doing a lot of effort. You're taking a lot of effort to keep your head right on top of the golf ball, I feel, with a lot of tilt. And those are those numbers that we're looking at. Shoulder turn, 76. Shoulder tilt, 52. Our tour average shoulder tilt at the top here is only about 36 degrees.
I'm not sure.
And you're at 52 degrees.
This is this way?
Your shoulder, left shoulder being down.
Okay.
At the top. So
it's not
essentially
down
you're down too far.
Too far.
So let's say the right amount of tilt would be here. You're like this.
Okay.
All right. So getting that extra tilt, what it does is it does a few things. One is it's going to lead you into a more over-the-top swing in general, which...
That just doesn't make sense as well. I mean, we have to look at... I don't know if I can find the video where it's down the line, but that just does not look like 52 degrees of tilt. Okay, so I had to go and find this guy's channel, and I found the next step in this evaluation. Let's take a little listen to see.
All right, as we go ahead and start the downswing now, leading with the hip, you'll see him move laterally towards the target. That's right. That's what needs to happen. Hips will move laterally. The upper body kind of hangs back, though. He's still at arm parallel to the ground. He still has quite a bit of the angle there in the wrist. So go ahead and try to get you to the same point. We see your hips moving to the target. But one major difference when you look at those two. Can you see how because you weren't pivoted very well at the top, now how your upper body's kind of leaning in with the hip? So it's like everything's going instead of the hips going and the upper body staying back. Now you've got yourself in this position where you have to pull your whole body forward. And the other thing that we see is that we're not really getting the drive from the right knee that we're getting from Tiger. So he's driving through that shot with his right.
Well, of course she can't drive when that ball position's stuck on his right foot. Look how far that ball position is on him versus Tiger. Look how much more room Tiger has, including that drive. Look at the ball position on the right side. How can you expect anybody to drive over where they're going to top the ball every single time? So he has learned to stay back, get crunched up, and lose his angle and flip those hands at impact because of that ball position and that massive forepress. The amount of forepress he had to lean so far left to close his 2 circles. He could not. So he's learned how to just stay back, stay centered, flip, no weight distribution. But it's all ball position. It's all setup. So for him to glaze over that whole setup, everything looks great. That is a huge red flag and something that I would just be so disappointed. I'm very disappointed now, some 15 years later, that it wasn't addressed. And I hope this guy's still playing golf and it's figured out. It's your setup.
Right knee. That's where a lot of power comes from. So I'm not saying you need more power. I'm just saying that there's a lot of potential for more power based on what you're doing in your swing. Take him a little further down. We'll go all the way to where the club hits his hip. There's thigh. And we look and see he still has almost that 90-degree angle there in the wrist. We get the hands to about the same point over here, and we're seeing a major difference in the two, right? All right, so if we're just drawing this out with Tiger here, we're going to draw down from here and out to here. And then we're going to go ahead and draw the same here. And draw down to your arm. Pretty close. Big difference in the angle that we're maintaining, right? We need to hold that as close to 90 as we can, as long as we can. So you do what we call a cast. And I'll explain the cast a little bit more in depth to you here in a minute. But the cast is essentially where your hands cast the club down. So as it's coming down, instead of just turning your shoulders through, you're also throwing your hands in a casting motion. So that right there in itself, I'll tell you what it's going to cause. That's your high ball flights. So the ones you hit high is because you're cast. The ones you hit low or the ones you hit left is because you're casting and flipping. And we'll get into the flip here in just a second. So we'll go ahead and go a little further in. You see how his hands are well out in front of that golf ball before impact? Your hands are just barely in front. And another thing, you said you felt like this one was pretty good. So this is the one you said that felt pretty good. The other ones you...
All right, so, man, this makes me so angry. You know, that I don't hear much education. I just hear a bunch of, oh, you suck at this, you suck at this, you don't do this, you don't do that. How's the guy going to feel leaving this lesson? A simple thing is like, hey, look, here are your positions. You're a good athlete. You found a way to hit the golf ball. Let's talk about why you found a way to hit this golf ball. Look at that ball position. Look at your center of your circle. Your center of your circle is so far back that you've learned to manipulate your body into position, so you have to throw your hands early. Let's just change that center of the circle and move it up and get you more freedom so you can become more of the athlete and utilize your athletic ability more efficiently. The guy on the left, we're looking at him, but remember, he's got many decades and millions of golf balls and golf ball swings and professionals to help him out. We're not expecting you to be like this guy. And this is what just drives me nuts about systems. They just teach numbers and positions and they don't look at the guy on the right. The guy on the right is stuck at his ability and he needs to take responsibility for his setup. And once you take responsibility for setup and you recognize you cannot be the guy on the left side that has correct fundamentals, it's going to be very challenging. But of course, this is how they do it. They just point out all these flaws and say, man, you got to fix this is going to take this long, it's going to blah, blah. It's 52 lessons over 4 years. It's going to cost you $6,000. Let's get it down. I can't really watch any more of this. It's going to drive me nuts. But I really want you to take a look at this one, because this one just made me even more frustrated, if that's possible. So for this one, I want you to look at the first image that he shows the student based on his first swing, and he's going to talk about his numbers, and then we're going to just go straight ahead to where he's doing his evaluation and show his new numbers and listen to what the coach says.
Things that I think if you do not hit it on the center, you tend to hit it a little bit toward the toe of your toe.
I've been hitting a lot off the toe a lot.
Yeah, you can see here this one's 30%. It'll say on there, it'll show you if it's on the center, 30, 60, 100% toe. or the same thing with the heel. You definitely, a few of them are on the toe, and what that's going to cause you to do is that may cause some of them that push off to the right a little bit there. You'll also lose some distance on them because it's just not as solid. You know, every quarter of an inch that you're toward the toe or the heel, you lose like 10% of your distance. So, you know, you hit on the toe, you might lose 10, 15 yards on there.
So let's listen to the new numbers, the very last swing of the evaluation.
Couple things. Number one, you're inside out 8 degrees, so you're not coming over the top anymore. You're swinging out to the right by getting extra turn there. And this one, you hit center of the club. This is a nice draw that would start right of your target and then draw to the left. If you're doing this, that's a little bit more of what I think you should see.
So first of all, the first swing was not outside to in, so there is a misleading of the students. And secondly, both swings, the first and the last one, based on those numbers, still produced draws. So for him to use this and say, hey, by you making our changes, you're already improving your ball flight, is an outright lie. Now keep in mind that both these numbers need to be relative to the target line, and I'm not sure the technology back then could include that. But let's just listen to the rest of this evaluation, and it's quite interesting. Okay, so here's the face on. Now, this is very important because the guy, he's comparing an iron swing with a driver swing. Now, why is that important? Because it's a completely different setup. But we're going to listen to how he relates positions he would like to see from the guy, the students, but he's using a driver setup, which doesn't make much sense to me. But let's just hear and see what he says.
You can see a little bit where hands are still kind of close to your body. I think that's more because of the takeaway. If we can get you turning a little bit more, we can see where he's getting more extension, like his hands are getting a little further away from his body. Your hands are still a little bit close to your right leg there, and again, that's where one of the things that shoulder turn ends up being a little bit short is, you know, he's getting more extension, really stretching out and turning more. If we look at his lower body again, we saw where you were overturning a little bit maybe from the other side, and we can see where your hip turn number ends up being a little bit high at the top. And then part of that you can see from this angle is where the lower body has moved more, like your left knee has come in more. We can see where, you know, he hasn't changed his lower body a whole lot from top, you know, from the beginning to the top there. Not a whole lot of change to it. For you, I think there's a little bit of extra movement. That's because you've overturned your lower body. The right leg is straightened, and again, that forces the left knee to come in more and bend more. You can see where for you, and this is what might cause your ball to hook a little bit extra there, is that, see, he's going to be holding that wrist hinge a little bit longer, and his club is angled back. For you, it's a little more the opposite way. You've kind of lost that wrist hinge, which will cause you to lose some power because you've unhinged your wrist a little bit early, and now you're coming in.
No mention about saying, hey, this guy's using a driver, it's on a tee, he's going to be able to stay back a little bit more. If you take a look at their hand positions, they're relatively the same compared to their shoulder tilts. Obviously, the one on the right side, he's already going to be striking the golf ball because it was swinging down on it with an iron. The ball position's further back. The one on the left side is a driver sitting on a tee. The guy's trying to swing up. And the thing that bothers the hell out of me is you see so many of these evaluations and lessons, and they're all using different pros, and they're all using different pros maybe to make a point about how they're trying to get somebody that looks similar to their student to try and convince them to do all these changes. But if you're going to have a system that measures the average professional, why don't you find the professional that's closest to your average and just use that professional instead of using all these other professionals that still have different arm planes, different path planes, different club face angles, different wrist hinges, different motions. They're still all over the board because it's based on an average. So this is where the individual should be using a system that's set up that's a little bit more foolproof than this, because it's still at the mercy of the pro and the pro's knowledge. So I don't care what system you have, if your pro's not knowledgeable about cause and effect, it's just a game of pictures. This picture's not as good as that picture. Let's get you 8 lessons to get you closer to that picture. Even though this picture's with a driver, this is probably with a wedge. Don't worry about that, but we want you to look more like that picture.
So your club actually bottoms out, you know, before the golf ball. We can see where, you know, your club is already angling up. So your club bottoms out before the golf ball, and then you're on the upswing, which can cause some of those fat shots too. Also loss of power. He's going to be holding that wrist hinge and unhinging them right at the golf ball. You know, just the result of some of the things that have happened before it, we can see where for him, left arm is going to be completely straight, and that left wrist will also be a little straight for you because of what we saw before. This is just sort of the end result of everything we've seen. where that left wrist is kind of cupping, and that's where, you know, you can see it in the follow through here where the left arm is kind of bending, and then that left wrist is
Why?
bending as well. You want to have great, you know, extension where
Why?
the arm's straight and the wrist is straight all the way through. This hip turn number, the pros will have that.
Okay, if I'm the student, I'm thinking to myself, why? Why is my left wrist like that? Why is my left arm like that? Oh, because it's not the guy on the left. You want it to be like this. Okay, well, why? What's making it do this? Why am I in this funky looking position? And none of this is being addressed. Maybe he did it off-site, but again, the whole purpose of this system is so they can video themselves and voice record so the student can go home and remember, oh, you know, I forgot what he said. Let me just hit play. But if none of this was said, man, what did he say about my wrist? Why was it like that? I don't know. I forgot.
About 42 on average. And, you know, you just visually, I'll pull up, this is about a turning, he does a lot of turning through, but we can see where as he hits the ball, look how much turn he has. His body's already facing out towards the target. That's a big source of power for you. Again, because your hips are coming in this way a little bit, and you've overturned back, you're not getting a lot of turn on the way through, which, like we said, is a big source of power. Yeah, I mean, I like the one on the right there. A couple things. You're leaning forward a little bit more, and that's a good thing. We want you to have a posture like that. That's really good. And more importantly, I like the space there between your hands.
Okay, so the rest of this video, he just goes over some changes, and they look pretty good. I give the guy credit. I mean, that setup definitely does look a lot better. Let me know what you think about this. Is this just me being in a crabby mood today, or is this some legitimacy? Is that a word? Legitimacy? Whatever. You know what I'm trying to say. Do you think that this makes sense? But if not, let me know your thoughts, comments below. I know that there are good pros out there in the GolfTEC world. I know that they have some good system if it's utilized correctly, and maybe that comes from training. Maybe they need to adopt more of a standard pro to compare them to. Something needs to happen because some of this just drives me nuts. Hope that helps you. See you next time. Fairways and greens.